Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be recapping my month of September 2024. I had a fantastic reading month. I was able to read a lot, but before I get started, I would love to hear what you're reading. Put what you read in September and how you felt about it in the comment section down below. I love to see what everyone else is reading. So let's talk about September. So I am an avid reader. I do read quite a bit, and in the month of September I read 16 books. But most notably, as opposed to my overall trend, I leaned heavily into nonfiction this month, particularly medieval, Middle Ages, that time period, however you want to phrase it. So I was able to go really deeply, or more deeply than normal, on one subject, but that kind of put out of balance my general balance that I maintain between 50% fiction and 50% nonfiction. So I do feel like I'm very heavily weighted in nonfiction this month. However, I see that people are enjoying my videos on the Middle Ages, and I've been enjoying reading about it. So I will probably continue that trend for another month, but let's talk about what I was able to read this month. So I'm going to start with fiction because I only read 2 fiction books this month. The first was The Remarried Empress, which is another entry in the webtoon series that I have been reading, or like this published webtoon series. I like the series. If you like the series, you've probably seen my reviews on it. It's about an empress who has been divorced by her husband, who's making bad decisions with his life with regard to his kingdom and her navigation forward. It's kind of a unique romance because it has this aspect that she is an empress in a loveless marriage who then gets divorced. So a very unique setup. But I do like the book overall, and volume 6 had a lot of plot development. The second book I read that was fiction was actually a very poorly rated book in my opinion, and that was High Times in the Low Parliament by Kelly Robson. I rated this book 2 stars, and I rarely rate books less than 3 stars. That's not a rule by me. I'm just very particular about what I read, and I feel like I'm quite good at selecting books that I'm probably going to enjoy, or at least give a 3-star, and I rarely finish books that aren't enjoyable. I will only finish a book if it's like for a book club or something that I've already committed to finishing and reading, or if it's so short that I might as well just finish, or if I hang on for too long and realize, oh, this book isn't getting better. And that's what happened with this book. It was a little over 100 pages. I thought something was going to happen, and it just never did. I feel like the setup was really, really interesting, but it just fell flat, and I couldn't just get into it. But that being said, there were aspects of it that I enjoyed, and I would like to try something else by the author to give her another shot. So those were the 2 and the only fiction, and now we're going to get into the remaining 14 books, which are all non-fiction. So I'm going to do the non-medieval ones first, and then the medieval ones, because that's a huge section, and I'm just going to lump them together. So the first from the non-fiction I'm going to talk about is What the Dead Know by Barbara Butcher. This was a book on my TBR. I'm trying to work that list down, so here I am reading a book off it. This was about a New York City death investigator. At times, this was a very dark book, but it was a very interesting book. It's a very unique and necessary job, and Barbara Butcher does a good job of writing in a way that keeps people hooked on the stories that she tells. The stories about humans is something that we're all going to go through, death. So I think that she is able to discuss a lot of different aspects of city, of life, of living with other people, of family dynamics in her work as a New York City death investigator. So I do highly recommend that one, but make sure you're like in the right headspace to listen to it, because there were aspects that were quite grim, and personally for me, when I felt like the content of the book was going to become gory, I just fast forwarded a few seconds to skip the gory bits, and that's just me personally. Next was a book that was actually a reread for me. Even though it said on Goodreads I had never read it before, I must have missed marking it. That was Atomic Habits by James Clear. I enjoy this book. This is like my 3rd time listening to the audiobook. I did audiobook for this one too. It's enjoyable, but for me, it's a lot of common sense, I guess I would say. It doesn't feel like anything groundbreaking or revolutionary, at least to me. But that being said, and everyone's different, everyone finds certain things more difficult than others. I hate doing anything creative. I'm really bad at it. So there we go. I'm not good at everything, but I am good at building habits, following habits, and having a routine. That's something I have not really struggled with as an adult. I'm very self-disciplined. It's just something that comes naturally. I don't want to say easily, but I don't struggle to get it done. So Atomic Habits, well, it's interesting to understand the behavior reasoning behind some of these habit cues, and I've taken aspects of this book to heart and made changes over the couple years that I've read it. It isn't something I read because I'm looking to make a huge change in my life. I'm quite happy with the way my habits are set up. But that was a reread. Again, I think that's my third time reading it, and I finally added it to Goodreads. Next up was a photography collection by Steve Brim, Michigan's Upper Peninsula. This was just a photography collection of nature. If you like nature photography collections, there you have it. Next, Assyrian Prophecies by Simo Parpola. So this is a book about, I really enjoy Mesopotamian history as well. So this was just focusing on the texts that were related to Assyrian prophecies or prophecies that we have uncovered from Assyria. It was very detailed, but it wasn't so academic that I couldn't enjoy it. So I felt like that was a good tie-in to some of the other books that I have read. In that same vein, The Ancient Near East by Amanda Podeny. This was a very short introduction series. They all have the similar look of book, and if you've read a lot of books, you've probably seen these. They're brief introductions to one topic, and in this book, the author takes surviving cuneiform texts and applies them to the entirety of Mesopotamian history, which is a really broad time frame, and is able to kind of provide a very brief overview, a very short introduction, some might say, to the topic, and I felt like she did a good job, so I really enjoyed that book. Next up, Botanical Curses and Poisons by Fez Inkwright. This was a book about poisons, plants, fungi in history. It was enjoyable. It was fun. I wish I'd read the physical book instead of the audiobook on that one. The Bayeux Tapestry. This was actually someone who took the tapestry that shows the Norman Conquest and put it into a comic book form without really altering the tapestry at all. It was quite enjoyable. I liked it. Very simple, very short, very sweet, but kind of fun, and went well with other things I was reading at the time. Next, another book in the Medieval Craftsman series. I read Painters by Paul Binsky. I've been liking the Medieval Craftsman series. They're a little older, they're a little over 30 years old, but they have a really good introduction to different crafts that were employed and done during the Middle Ages, and this was about painters, and I really enjoyed it. Next was another audiobook by Francis Young called Magic in Merlin's Realm. This was the intersection between the occult and politics in British history. So throughout British history, kings have employed astrologers. There have been different treasonous plots employed that used magic or occult or whatever you want to say. And this book just compiled all of it from the earliest of times all the way through people in World War II. So I think it was a very interesting book, and I really enjoyed it, and I would read something else by Francis Young because I think it was a unique and interesting topic. Another one, this is by Max Adams. This was an audiobook called The First Kingdom, which looks at the sub-Roman Britain period. So this is the period of British history when the Romans have left Britain, but the Normans have not come in. The Normans haven't come in, but it's the time between 410 when the Romans leave and 597 when St. Augustine comes. So it's really this period that's maybe the Dark Ages, or someone has kind of dimmed the lights on the history of Britain, and we can't really see everything. I think the phrase used in the book was we have snapshots, not movies of this time, and the author does a really good job putting all of this together to try to piece together what happened in that time that we call the sub-Roman Britain period. The next was a book that kind of focused in on a king that appeared a little bit before the Norman invasion, Ethelred the Unready. This was a biography of the king, but it was very enjoyable, and some of the things that happened during Ethelred's reign directly contribute to the Norman invasion and things that happened later in British history. So he's a king that I feel like not everyone's familiar with, but should be because he is very important. Another book in the same time period, we can see I had a little bit of a theme this month, was The Battle of Hastings by Jim Bradbury. This was a military history, which I don't normally gravitate towards. I feel like I had enough of those little bars moving around on a chart in American history during the Civil War to really put me off military history, but this one was quite enjoyable and I did like it. I feel like Jim Bradbury did a good job covering the topic, and for someone who doesn't particularly care for military history, I don't dislike it, but I never gravitate towards it. The fact that it jumped off the shelf to me, I took it home, I read it, and I gave it a 4-star read means that it's probably very, very well done, and if you like military history, I can imagine it is just that much better. Or maybe it's worse, maybe my lack of knowledge is what made it so good. You will have to tell me. Next was another audiobook, this one by Ian Mortimer, called Medieval Horizons, Why the Middle Ages Matter. And in this book, Mortimer asserts that things did change positively, mostly throughout the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages is not a stagnant time, but a time of great change, and a lot of it in a positive direction. And this tied in with another book that I listened to a few years ago called The Bright Ages. I saw a lot of similarities. I know this is not Ian Mortimer's most famous work. I think he's best known for that time traveling to medieval England book, which is on my to-read list and I know I've received comments about. So I do want to read more by him because I enjoyed the Medieval Horizons so much that I just really want to read more by him. I was impressed with that book. So I will be reading more or listening to more. And the final one on this massive recounting is Notre Dame by Ken Follett. I know this is not his most famous work, but I enjoyed this book. This is a very, very short, small book that just discusses the histories of cathedrals and particularly the history of Notre Dame. In comparison to some of these other books on the list, like Magic in Merlin's Realm and The First Kingdom, and some of these audiobooks that really were 10 plus hours long, Notre Dame was only an hour-long audiobook and went very, very fast. But I think, and I discussed in my review of this book, that it kind of slotted into this web I'm building of knowledge in a way that maybe by itself it's kind of a not good because I feel like I'm passing judgment on the book. Standalone, it maybe doesn't provide a comprehensive review of the cathedral, but when slotting in with greater knowledge on the topic, I think the author did a really good job and I did wind up enjoying the book overall. So that's what I read in September 2024, 16 books, very heavy on the audiobooks as well. I was listening to a lot of audiobooks while cleaning up around the house, while taking some road trips. So I was able to get through a lot of the audiobooks, which was, I don't want to say surprising because I do prefer print reading, but an audiobook isn't bad. I do find that I retain less when I listen to an audiobook though, so I prefer to read physical books, but the audiobooks are just fantastic when I need to do things like fold laundry or wash dishes. I can listen to something. And in some cases, I actually prefer audiobooks over print. It is rare, but the example on this list would be The First Kingdom by Max Adams. That book wasn't, I wouldn't say academic, but it was quite dry. It felt like a recitation of facts at times, but due to the audiobook narration, it was able to hold my attention better than a book that wasn't narrated. Like if I had read that book in physical print, I think that's a case where it would have taken me longer to get through the physical book than listening to the audiobook narration. That is my massive list of books that I read in September 2024. And as always, I want to hear from you. What did you think about this book? These books that I read, I will have the ones I have reviewed linked down below. And I want to know what you're reading. What did you read in September? What are you reading in October? Please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.